Hey, everybody. Good morning and welcome back to the ChatGTM podcast. It's your irascible host, Michael Beck. And as always, or almost always, my business partner in crime, Mr. Chad Horn, the man with the art. How you doing today, Mr. Chad?
Mighty glad to be here today, Beck. We have a special guest today, do we not?
You're grinning like a Cheshire cat. Why is that?
Well, I'll frame it this way. Once in a while, we'll have a guest on the program.
Yeah.
It's like, we might be talking to them a while. What am I going to ask them about? What might actually be interesting? I
Yeah.
don't know. We're going to have the opposite problem today.
Too many questions?
Too many questions.
What if I told you a year ago we'd be having the former CEO of Yum Brands on our show?
I would have believed you because we were dreaming big back then.
Manifest destiny, baby. I love it. Absolutely love it. Well, that teased up nicely. Guys, thank you for joining us here today. And it is a really exciting moment for us because there's folks that you get to talk to, and we love having all of our guests on. And there's none that's better than any other, but there's ones that spark and go, wow, they were there. They made things happen. You know, we know some people that, for example, one of our friends helped make Coke Zero a thing. We have friends that have been instrumental in building large brands, but we've never had somebody on this show that actually defined where streets go, that led a $1 billion company that made some very serious decisions, but also when we talked to him on the side before we got on, realized that it wasn't all about him. And that, I think that was the most exciting thing about our guest today, is that when we talked about him, he was immediately talking about his team, not himself. He wasn't pounding his chest. And I hope he feels a little bit, he's blushing right now because I'm gushing. But everybody, today, honestly, it's a distinct honor. Today's guest is Mr. Greg Creed. He's the former CEO of Yum Brands, the man who helped scale Taco Bell, KFC, and Pizza Hut into global heavyweights, and co-author of Red Marketing, the 3 ingredients of leading brands. Greg doesn't talk about marketing like it's a department. He treats it like a behavioral science experiment with better branding and bigger stakes. He's built billion-dollar brands by focusing on something most companies politely ignore: real human desire. If you've ever wondered why some brands feel inevitable and why others feel like they're trying too hard, this is the guy who knows the difference. Greg, welcome to the show. I feel like an old friend.
Yeah, Michael and Chad, it's great to be here. And yeah, look, even our little chat before, I really enjoyed, and I'm really delighted to be on the show. Really am.
You totally blew up my agenda in the best way possible. And I teased that when I gave your introduction. And I'm cannonballing here. Normally I say, how you doing? And I know how you're doing because we already had a talk before. And I don't know if the audience needs to know how well you're doing because you have a bright and happy voice, I think, that says that. But let's cannonball in. You mentioned on our call, you're from Newport Beach or from Orange County, and also in Texas you have places. But I mentioned that I live near One Glen Bell Way when I was in Orange County, and you told a story about how you helped make One Glen Bell Way a thing. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we had a building in Irvine, and the it was one of those old buildings. It was circular, and every department was on the floor, which didn't
Was it
help.
like the floor building, or it was something big before that? It was like another.
Oh no, the building we went to was the building that Range Rover and Aston Martin had when Ford owned Prestige, their Prestige division.
Got it.
But we were in an old building, round, every department's on the floor, no one collaborates, and we didn't also have a room for childcare. And I was like, this is crazy. So we had to find a new building. So we found this new building, which is only a couple of miles away. And it sort of had like a little road. And I was like, I want to honor Glenn Bell because I'd got to know Glenn before he got Parkinson's. And so I said, we should name it One Glen Bell Way, which is a double entendre, right? So, it's an address, but it's also, there's only one way Glenn would do things, the right way. And so I thought, this will be easy. We'll just ask them to change the address. Anyway, they come back and they go, nah, really can't change addresses. Addresses are only for dead people. I'm like, well, geez, I don't want to wish, ill will on Glenn. That's not what I'm after. But I did know the fire chief and the police chief. And I said to them, look, I'm trying to honor a great man. And I think it was because they understood it was about honoring someone. It wasn't about a fad. It wasn't a PR stunt or whatever. But they actually agreed. And so the address for Taco Bell is One Glen Bell Way in Irvine. And I love it because, when you write it and when you talk about it, you are honoring Glenn just by
Every single time.
Every single time, hey, we're at One Glen Bell Way. And I got to know him and got to know his family. And I just wanted to do everything I could to honor the man who had created what we thought was, just the greatest brand.
Marketing is literally in your DNA. You can't help it.
I cannot help it. Everywhere I go, I look at things. I'm like, well, how could that be easier? What's the essence of that brand? How could we simplify? I think my family are like sick of it. They're like, Dad, stop it. Like everybody else looks at things, and I sort of look at it in this weird, different way. But
As
anyway.
long as you're not rebranding your kids' names, I think you're fine.
Oh no, thank God for that. That was probably one of the easiest choices I had to make. I just did whatever my wife wanted. I've decided that was
Smart
the
man.
smart move. That was the
Smart man.
smart.
Chad, take us in.
Well, yeah. So just springboarding off that a bit. So
Yeah,
you were talking about honoring Glenn in the way in that story, and it sounds like that's a theme, right? You're honoring your team, but I'm sure everybody who doesn't know you is wondering, all
yeah,
right, Greg must be really good at some things to have achieved what you have and accomplished what you have in your life and career. What about your skills, experience, etc., has allowed you to achieve what you have, right? What is the core? Because you've talked
yeah,
before that your team is really the ones doing the work,
yeah.
but you got to bring something to the table to
Yeah, I
pull
know.
all
Can
that
I
together.
can I start with what I really am bad at? Because
Yeah.
I always feel better with, and it's so funny because I think being vulnerable is one of the keys to great leadership. And I find, I just going to be honest, I think Americans suck at being vulnerable. You guys are just terrible at it. I mean, I remember driving to work and every kid was an honor student. You drive in the back in the minivan and I'm like, well, we're at the dumb kids because not everyone can be a national honor student. So anyway, so I get to Taco Bell like a long time ago, and I get up and I go, "Hi, I'm Greg, and I'm from Australia, and I cannot spell, and I'm really bad at process." Well, after it, the HR team are like, "You can't be saying that stuff," and I'm like, "Well, yes, I can because I really am the world's worst speller." The joke at the moment is our 6-year-old grandson spells better than I do, and I'm really bad at process. I'm not a process guy, and the only reason I want to start with it is I feel that if you get up in front of people and are vulnerable with what you're not good at, two things happen. One, it makes you appear human. And secondly, you can then say, hey, I'm good at other things. And then by saying that, you don't become across as an egomaniac, right? Because otherwise, if you just get up there, if I just answered your question and said, I think I'm really good at, getting the best out of teams and inspiring people are going to go, well, he's got a ticket on himself. Maybe that's an Australian saying. He sort of thinks his head's too big, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, part of it is about being vulnerable about saying what you're not good at. Yeah, I think what I'd like to think I'm good at is inspiring people to achieve greatness, and which doesn't mean I achieve greatness at all. I go back to when I was at school. I played rugby and cricket and soccer, and I probably was the captain of all those teams, but I was not the best player on the team. And I think people confuse being the best player with being the captain. And I think they're very different roles. And so I'm not sure I was ever the greatest individual contributor.
Yeah.
I mean, I played pretty well. I made the team, but I would honestly say I was not the best at any of those sports, right? But I was the captain. And so I think my ability isn't to be the best individual contributor. It's hopefully to get the best out of all the great individual contributors on the team. I think if you boil it down, that's what I think I just was blessed to be good at.
Well, that's a classic mistake in hospitality is that your best server or your best this or that's going to make a great manager.
Exactly. And I've seen people who are great RGMs not make great area coaches. I've seen great area coaches make great district managers. And equally, I will argue, I was not the greatest brand manager God put on the planet, right? Because a brand manager has to be good at process. You got to process things, right?
Yeah.
And so I was lucky enough to sort of scrape through being an average brand manager to one day be a chief marketing officer because I honestly thought, I'm not a process guy and, getting things to happen was not my gig. My idea was coming up with ideas. I had one boss who said, "Go, can you please stop with the ideas and just make the ideas we've got work? That would be really helpful." So
That's
yeah, I think
your
it's just about, sorry.
That's someone, Chad, that sounds familiar. We have a lot of ideas that we have things we need to finish first.
I know. And I don't need to finish something. I mean, I don't need to personally finish it. There are people who just have to complete the task. I'm like, oh no, what's another big idea? Anyway,
Wow. Well,
I think that's the answer.
and this is in line with what we talked about a little bit before we got on the call is you've run some of the biggest brands on earth. What do you believe now about consumers and more or even about the teams that are working in the stores that you would have argued against 10 years ago? What's different?
Yeah, I think what's different is not many people are having as much fun as I had. Um, I don't see, and it's not just it's in any retail environment. I don't think the customer service is what it used to be. But to be honest, I don't blame them. I had when for 1 year at Yum, I was the chief operating officer, which everyone thought was a bit crazy because I'm the marketing guy, right? But I had this saying, which was the customer experience will never exceed the team member experience.
Mhm.
And I think what's going on is we're not putting enough effort into the team member experience. and yet expecting them to deliver a superior customer experience. And, if I'm going to be a little biased here, but I'm on the board of Delta Airlines. And I think one of the things that Delta does amazingly well, and I know Ed Bastian, the CEO, he and I are good mates, is Ed cares about the team members. And he starts with, is this right for the team member? Let's make the team member's life better. Well, all that sort of stuff. And I honestly think that's why in the US context, Delta delivers a better customer experience, is because Ed understands it's not about just going straight to the customer. It's about ensuring that the team members feel appreciated and wanted and understood and listened to and all that sort of stuff. So I think what's happening and go back to restaurants is when, if you don't have a great experience as a customer, I never blame the server. I always think the management team aren't doing the right thing by their team members.
Yeah.
And you can do little things. When I ran Taco Bell, we and this was obviously a long time ago, we had a thing where any employee could solve any customer problem up to $10. And that empowered them, right? They felt empowered. Now, at the end of the day, everyone was like, oh my God, the P&L is going to go to hell in a handbasket. We couldn't even find anything on the P&L, because invariably what happens is the customer's not happy. They go to the team member has to go to the assistant manager. And then ultimately the thing gets solved,
Right.
but no one feels empowered. And so empowering your frontline teams to solve, now in those days, the check average was probably $7. So we were solving most problems.
Right.
But the point was, they felt empowered. And that is, I think, why they delivered a superior customer experience. We also treated them really well and all that sort of stuff. But I don't think that we spend enough time as management or leadership in any retail environment thinking enough about the team member experience before we think about the customer experience.
I have one more add-on
Yeah.
question, Chad, before we go. So thinking about that, it sparked off the idea of the personal brand. And so what's your take on the emergence of the personal brand and how it's affecting modern businesses, right? Because it used to be I worked for Taco Bell.
Right.
And now I'm a brand that works at Taco Bell, and I'm going to take
Yeah.
my customer with me, or some
Yeah.
version of that. What's your take on
Well, I always felt that if you think about it, there's, 7.2 billion people on the planet, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Every one of those people is unique. I've always believed that I am a brand. That, if you think about what is a brand has packaging, that's how we dress. A brand, either delivers stuff or doesn't deliver stuff, whatever it is. So I've even tried to make myself distinctive, not in a, I had this saying, which is, be different to be better, not just to be different. And I think that what happens is a lot of people just want to be different to be different. My whole idea is you need to be different, but you need to do it so it makes you better. And I think that people forget the better part of that concept, right? So I'll give you a good example. So my last name is Creed, right? Obviously. There is a Creed fragrance. I have nothing to do with the Creed family. Trust me. I wish I would. I'd be a bazillionaire. But anyway, they invited me many years ago to create my own Creed aftershave. So
cool.
I have a Creed aftershave that I now make because I buy the big bottles and I mix it up as per the day I spent with them. And the number of people who go, man, that's a really nice aftershave and good news is my wife is there, so this is not to worry about. But anyway, the number of people that go, man, where can I buy that? And the answer is you can't, because it's mine. And so I think that now that doesn't mean you can see me. I don't dress, I dress pretty, my kids would say uncool, and I have an uncool haircut and all that sort of stuff. So, but I think there are little parts about everyone that we could make distinctive. And then, so in my case, one of them is I have my own personalized Creed aftershave.
But is it hurting modern businesses where the employee now thinks that the company works for them in a way?
I think at the end of the day, it's like everything, like, things swing from one side to the other, right? Everyone says, well, there's no loyalty. No one hangs around anymore. And the answer is, well, does the company give them loyalty in return, right? So, I think it works both ways. The beauty is, I had a boss, David Novak, who said, the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or. And so the question is, if you can align your brand with the company brand, I mean, I was so comfortable at Taco Bell. It was just my place. If it was like someone invented a place for me to be, it was Taco Bell. And so in that sense, I was my absolute happiest and my absolute best. And I think I performed my best because the brand and I were symbiotic in a sense, right? It was a place where I called it left of center. Everyone thought it was, politically, it wasn't so much politically, but where we were just, a little left of center. And so I think the challenge today for leadership is if you can create a culture where the individual brand and the brand can coexist, I think you've hit nirvana. And I even say to people, look, if you're at a company and you can't be your true self, one of my advice to young people, I have two advices. One is do the job no one else wants to do. And the second one is be your true self. And I say to them, if you can't be your true self, then you need to go find another place to be your true self. And so I think it's not the or, it's not, one is or the other. I think it's and, which is, can you find a place where you can be your true self, your true brand, and that makes the brand that you're working on, an even better place, an even better brand. For me, that was definitely Taco.
So, Greg, you mentioned leadership needs to make work more fun.
Yeah.
Leadership needs to take better care of the employee
Mhm.
experience because that's
Yep.
where the guest experience shows up.
Yep.
And so, to kind of distill that into advice for leadership, because you've advocated for smart, heart,
Yep.
and courage.
Courage. Yep.
Which of those is leadership lacking the most and needs the most help with?
I think it's courage. And the thing that's least important is there's two parts to smart. There's IQ and EQ, right? And it's so funny because as parents, we care maniacally about our kids' grades. I think that's the least important thing in defining success and happiness in life. Trust me, I was a good B student, and I jokingly say, without me, the A students don't look so smart. So the A students really needed me because without me, who knows how smart they are. Um, But I think that there's a certain IQ. I'm not suggesting, there's a certain IQ, but, is someone going to be a better leader if their IQ is 110 or 120? No, not at all. EQ, far more important. And the other interesting thing, and I'm not a psychologist, but I've got a bunch of friends who are, you can't improve your IQ. If you could read as many books as you want and your IQ is going to be your IQ, you can dramatically improve your emotional intelligence, which is great. Heart is, heart for people and a heart for the business you're in. And then courage, it's really interesting. I always struggled to sort of like, what is courage? And then I heard a great definition, which is courage is knowledge plus conviction plus action. And that really, I think, sums up courage. And I think where most people fall down is not in the knowledge space. It's not even in the conviction space. It's they don't act. And so pulling the trigger, I think, is really what is lacking. And when I see organizations that aren't doing well, or, if I get asked to help consolidate organizations that aren't doing well, it's not they don't have enough knowledge. It's not they don't have a conviction to want to get better. It's just that no one will pull the trigger. And that's a culture issue. That is a culture issue because if you're more worried about the downside of making a bad decision than you are the upside of making a great decision, you won't make that decision. And so I honestly believe that, I'm going to go to my grave believing that culture fuels results. And in business school, you get taught this sort of strategy, structure, culture model. You write the strategy, you work out what the structure is, and then sort of implied in your spare time, worry about culture.
Right.
I think they're the absolute right ingredients. I just think they're in the wrong order. And I think the order is culture, strategy, structure. And there is two cultures you have to understand. One is the external culture, like what's going on in society. So right now, what's going on in society. And then the other is what's happening with your internal culture. And if you don't have a really good handle on what's happening externally and what's going on inside your own organization, you can write a brilliant strategy that will be really good at Harvard and will have no chance of being successful. And so, yeah, I think it's the courage to act. And at the same time, it's the ability to create culture in which everyone is brave enough to act, if that makes sense.
That sparks off something that only a few people that I think we could ever run into could answer, and you're one of them. What's something about leadership that only comes obvious after you're responsible for tens of thousands of people?
What I learned early on was everyone judges everything you say, do, and like if you blink. My joke was if I walked past a wall and I said, "Boy, that would look really good blue," the next day someone's painted it blue.
It's gospel.
It's gospel.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so what you've got to be very conscious of is when you're thinking out loud. And I'm bad because I'm an out loud thinker. There are people who think internally. I'm like, well, I want about this, and I want about that, and I want about this, and then all of a sudden you can have the organization, run all over the place, right?
Right.
So I think the thing I didn't appreciate was that everybody is looking at everything you do and everything you say. Now, the good news is you can use this for good or you can use this for evil. It's like everything in life, right?
Right.
So can I give you a good example of how I think I use so at Yarn, we had a real thing about inclusiveness. Everyone was included. And you can say it's an inclusive culture.
Right.
But what I did is I got ordained online and ended up being the marriage celebrant for two very good ladies who got married in Louisville.
Oh.
And I think I'm the only Fortune 500 CEO that's probably ever married two lesbians. And I didn't marry them, but I was the marriage celebrant for them.
You'd have to be in Utah.
And that's yeah, exactly. And so it's one thing to say everyone's included, but as the CEO to act, now I did it because I love both of these ladies. They're very dear friends of mine. They're very special. But I'm going to be honest, I was not naive enough to know that this would send a signal to the organization of what inclusiveness meant for me, right? And so that's where you can use the power of your position for good. And I still think you get judged more by your actions than your words, right? So that's just a little example of how I think I didn't understand it in the beginning. Then I understood it, and then I hopefully used it for good.
Thanks.
So, Greg, before we started this off, you mentioned that things are really stressful right now in
Yeah.
the world, in business.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that? Like, what is this added stress really in our world right now as it relates to businesses being able to properly function?
Yeah, I think there's, I think so I retired in early 2020, just before COVID, actually. And, you sort of, people go, oh, business was stressful. And then we had COVID, which was
Hmm.
incredibly stressful. I actually think where we are right now is even more stressful. And as I talk to executives and coach executives, I think they're under even more stress and I think the stress is occurring between this battle between their internal values and what they can externally say.
Mm.
And I think that's causing a lot of turmoil inside people right now. Because you get back to when I was running Taco Bell, I was running Yum. You could express your opinion and people could agree with you or disagree with you. And I'm not saying there weren't disagreeers and all that sort of stuff. And then in COVID, we sort of all rallied together, actually. We rallied around this sort of common enemy. I think when I talk to people what now, I find the biggest issue they've got is their internal values. They either can't express publicly or it's diametrically opposed to, what's acceptable externally. And I think that's causing a great amount of undue stress. As I said, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or anything like that, and I think because no one's going to express an opinion, and then maybe they'll express an opinion if it's what they think people want to hear, but
Sure.
if it's counter to what's expected, I think, and they're not so much worried about themselves. I think they're worried about the implications for their business.
Yeah.
And at the same time, though, employees want to know what the boss stands for.
Mm.
If you're the CEO, it doesn't matter, man, woman, whoever you are, people want to know what you stand for. I had no problem sharing what I stood for, and everyone pretty much knew what I stood for.
Right.
And I think these days that's not as easy. And I think that's causing a huge amount of stress. So I don't think it's the decisions they have to make. I think it's this internal challenge between their own value system and the value system that they think will not get them into trouble.
Mm.
Greg, it seems like that would relate to your point on courage before.
Yeah,
But I don't think you're advocating for courageously doing whatever you think is right and feel and business results be damned. So how do you
exactly.
reconcile those two things?
Yeah, I mean, the courage thing is, people say, well, how do you know courage? Well, courage isn't jumping off a cliff without a parachute. Okay. I'm not suggesting that's stupidity. There's a difference between courage and stupidity. I'm not suggesting stupidity, but I think there's a good way. I'll give you an example. So DEI is arguably not something you can talk about, not something you can write about and all that sort of stuff, right? So if you go out and say that, you would probably get a bit of a backlash. So I've tried to reframe that as giving ability opportunity. And so if you go out there and say, well, I believe that one of our value, I'm just making up, the value of company A is to give ability opportunity. I think that's a really clever way of saying I'm not saying ability based on race or gender or sexual orientation or skin color. I'm just saying give ability opportunity. And I think it would be hard for people to disagree with that. I'm not using the words DEI,
Yeah.
but I'm essentially saying DEI, but in, I think, a way. So I think what executives have got to do is find the giving ability opportunity equivalent of DEI and say to people, yeah, we do believe as an organization in giving people, giving ability opportunity wherever it is in the organization from the very beginning to wherever. And it doesn't matter about all of the things that, and it's not about checking a box. So I think you can still talk about it. And I think you can still have your values be expressed, but you've just got to do it in a smart way. And I think what people aren't doing is they're like, oh, well, we can't say DEI, so we'll stop saying DEI. No, stop saying DEI because that's the smart business decision. I
Right.
mean, as in external business decision. But there's nothing to stop you saying giving ability opportunity.
Right.
And I think people have got to think about what is the smart way to say what their values encompass so that it can be said internally, it can be said externally, and you don't, as you said, you don't want to put the business at risk. So that I think that's just a little example of how I think you people need to think things through. I think there's always a way. You've just got to think about it and spend some time, thinking about it. Because who's going to disagree with I want to give ability opportunity? That means I want to
Very
give
few.
old fat white guys like me ability opportunity as well.
Greg, you open up a door there. We met actually, I believe, at the Prosper Company's Prosper
Correct.
Forum a couple of years ago. I
Yeah.
believe you were a keynote at that event.
Yeah.
And we just talked a little bit about some bravery and taking a stand and drawing a line. What is it about that organization? And we can leave out the acronym it supports if you want. But what is it that draws you to that organization that's gotten your time and attention? Because I'll take a stand. I love Prosper. I love what
Yep.
the mission is. I love what they're doing. I love what they put together. I love the format of their program,
Yep.
the Accelerator conference as well. But what is
Yeah.
it about that organization that has you jazzed?
What has me jazzed is, in fact, probably the accelerator part of the program, which is actually giving ability opportunity, right?
There you
I
go.
mean, I know that's,
Is David Job gonna have to cut you a check down for this?
I know I have to, but what I love is, and what, so, I've got my daughter and a friend of her, my daughter has a friend and he's in the restaurant business starting out. And so I invited him to be my accelerator guest. And so it's one thing to say, well, this is great, but it's one thing to also, it's another thing when you personally see the impact, right? So I've seen the impact on him having been at Prosper, being at the Accelerator conference, being an accelerator, and just giving him the confidence and the skills in order to be he's a great human being.
Yeah.
And now helping me obviously become a better operator. So I think that a lot of what conferences are all about, the vendors and I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that,
Oh, sure.
but they don't always tackle the really issues of the day.
Yeah.
And what I love about Prosper is it tackles the issues of the day. It invites people like me along who've had experience, and we can share both the mistakes we've made. Because that's the other funny thing is it's so funny, but people go, oh yeah, to be the CEO, you must have made a mistake. You've got to be kidding me, right? Like, there isn't enough time on a podcast to talk about the mistakes. It's one of my favorite sayings, which is in the old days, and people won't understand it, but there was always an eraser on the end of the pencil. And that was so you could erase your mistakes and try again, right? So, what I love about it is it really addresses the issue of the day head on. I mean, not around the about. And secondly, it's a great place for the next generation and the next generation of leaders to be exposed to the more senior leaders who've made mistakes and had successes, and for us to share those, and hopefully for them to take away the courage, to be, I don't know, just to be themselves. Yeah. So I love Prosper. I love the Accelerator. And as I said, having a friend of my daughter's who was my guest even reinforced it even more, just how powerful the Prosper conference is.
Greg, you said the issues of the day, and that triggered in my mind the human tendency to preference the now in terms of its importance and
Yeah.
uniqueness and specialness in history. Probably, long as I've lived, it feels like that's even more prominent now with AI. Like, what's going to happen? So I'm curious for you, as someone who's been at this a while, what do you see that we're overinflating and over preferencing now in terms of its uniqueness and specialness for this moment in history?
I think like everything in life, unfortunately, we tend to go to the dark side before we go to the good side. And so, everybody is out there sort of, predicting, oh, there's going to be thousands of job losses and a whole bunch of things, right? And rather than saying, well, what's the good side of this? I mean, I'm not an AI expert in that sense by any stretch of the imagination, but I understand, they've done tests where every student could have a customized learning program from them, even in a public school. They've tested this, right? So if you think about it, when I went to school, we all got taught the same stuff, whether you're smart, middle, at the back of the class, wherever. Now they're basically saying AI can customize an education program for the skills and the abilities and the lack of abilities for every child on the planet. Can you imagine how powerful that is?
Yeah.
That to me is incredibly powerful. I'll give an example. At Delta, this is how we're using AI at Delta. We're using it to say when, like we'll take Detroit, where we have about a 70 share of Detroit and we probably own 70% of the gates, right? We're using AI to say, where do we actually, at what gate do we park the plane so that the flight attendants and the pilots have the least distance to walk to their next flight?
Hmm.
That's a really good use of AI, right? And go back to the team member experience. We'll never exceed the customer experience. We'll never exceed the team member experience. They're literally using AI to say, okay, with all these flights that come in and go, and when the pilots and the flight attendants all move around, what is the optimal place to put every plane so that people have to walk less to get from their one flight to the next flight? See, that to me is that's good, right? That is really good stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think that the stories we're hearing are all about, well, there's going to be job losses and no one's going to have a job and robots will be doing whatever the hell we do and all that, which I think is garbage. And but I think what we're not doing as a society is talking enough about the good stories. Like, hey, how could we customize an educational syllabus for every child with their strengths and opportunities? And then things like what Delta are doing, which is, how do we just make it easier? And the other question is, maybe we put people on the same plane and we fly the plane to a different place. So instead of them having, the pilots and the flight attendants, going to another flight, AI is basically saying, well, what if we kept them all together as a team and we don't, so this plane instead of going this route now does that route. So you can't do that. The human brain just can't do that. But
It would be the most maddening job on earth if that was your job.
Well, it is someone's job. I mean, it is someone's job today. And can you imagine how hard that is?
Yeah.
I'll give I went to the local Taco Bell in Dallas where I live. I still eat Taco Bell every week, though my wife thinks I should not have the full strength Mountain Dew Baja Blast. But anyway, that's another. I went to place an order the other day and I realized it was AI, was taking my order. I mean, it was, and so I tried to make it not my normal order. I thought I wasn't trying to.
You're
I was
trying
just
to
trying to
break
see
it?
how, I wasn't trying to break it, but I pushed it and it handled it incredibly well. So I get round to the drive-through window and I said to the young lady, I said, did AI just take my order? And she goes, oh yeah, it did. And I said, well, what do you think about that? And she said, I love it. And I said, why do you love it? She said, because it's taken the order. I'm already getting the drink ready. And she said, it's actually made my life easier. Again, the customer experience will never exceed the team member experience. So here's everyone saying AI is going to get rid of jobs. And I'm not saying there aren't some areas that will happen, but here's a great example of where AI is making the team members' experience better. And she loved the fact. And she said, oh, it's only a test for a couple of weeks and then we're going to have to go back to doing it. She was like, I want this to stay because it actually made her job easier and she could have more time interacting with the customer. So I don't think those stories are getting out there enough. And so I think it's the negative stories that are out there. And I think as humans, we tend to, most of us, I'm not, but most of us tend to like, what's the downside? I tend to be I'm like the eternal optimist.
Right.
But I do think that we need to be telling more of those stories about, how Delta is using it, how Taco Bell is using it for good.
Bad news sells clicks.
I know it's like everyone wants a headline, right? So, but I think in the whole area, I think there will be negatives. There's negatives to everything. It's sort of like, I call it exception hunting, which is there are people on this planet whose job is to hunt for exceptions. So, it always rains in May. Well, in 1974, it didn't rain those people, right?
Yeah.
So I call them exception hunters.
Debbie Downer.
Yeah, so I'm like, there's always someone who's the exception hunter because there is always exceptions to the rule, but they get caught up in the exception, not the opportunity of the rule. And so I don't have a lot of time for exception hunters. I'll just be honest. Even at work, I don't need people to point out the fact that, in May 1974, it didn't rain. I'm just making it up. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so I think it's, well, what can organizations do? Because every time there's a disruption, and COVID was a disruption and economic crises are disruptions, every time there's a disruption, it's a chance. I actually think it's a chance for the number 2, 3, and 4 player to actually try to become number 1.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like a disruption is an opportunity. If that's your mindset. And so AI is a disruption. It's an opportunity. COVID was a disruption. It's an opportunity. Whatever will happen next week or in a couple of weeks' time, I think it's all about your mindset. And I think too many people's mindset is, oh, woe is me, or, oh my God, this is the end of the world. No, I think it is, what's the opportunity? When I've lived through a couple of global economic crises. When you get to my age, you've lived through a few of them. And what I found in business in the 02 and 08 crises, which I lived through, was, I call it, people go digging moats So they get their shovel out and they dig a moat around what they own because they want to protect it. I call both the O2 and the O8, but I call it the great land grab, because while everyone else is digging a moat, I wanted to be out there grabbing land, because everyone's internally focused digging holes versus out there saying, well, what customer can I win, or what need state can I meet better than someone else, right? So in that sense, I see disruption as always see disruption as an opportunity.
100%. And we're talking a little bit about AI and thinking about your role as CMO, or just in general in the competitive set.
Yeah.
Everyone has access to the same AI tools.
Yeah.
And I think I know that your answer to this, but I'm curious if you validate it. Where does the real competitive advantage actually come from?
Well, it's funny because, we were talking about wisdoms earlier, and one of them is dashboards inform, conversations reveal. And I think what happens is people think that in the data it's going to magically jump out at them. I think what we've stopped doing is actually having conversations with our customers. And conversations don't necessarily mean I get a research group. It could mean, what are the conversations your frontline employees are having with the customers when they're in your restaurant? It doesn't have to be artificial conversations. And so in that sense, I think it's all about getting to the insight. And I'll give you the best insight ever was how Mountain Dew Baja Blast came about, which was, we most restaurants, we measure drinks per 100 transactions, right? Which is what we did at Taco Bell. And we noticed they were declining amongst, I'll call it late teens, early 20s. And if you just went to business school, you go, oh, well, I'll drop the price and I hope I'll sell more. And there's a guy called Tom Wagner who worked for me. Great guy, brilliant guy. And Tom came in one day and said, they're getting a free drink at home. Because what happens is, mom and dad have gone out to the supermarket or the C-store. There's a bunch of cans of soft drinks sitting in the fridge. So what the kids are not stupid with their pocket money. They're like, well, I can't get Taco Bell at home, but I can get a Pepsi at home or a Mountain Dew at home. And so they weren't buying a drink because they're not stupid, And so we went to Pepsi and said, we need you to make us a proprietary beverage that you can't buy at a supermarket or a C-store. That's how this idea started.
Oh,
It was against an insight that you were getting a free drink at home. So I went to the Pepsi people and I said, hey, I need you to make me a proprietary beverage. They're like, oh, we don't do that. I'm like, yeah, I know you don't do it, but I need you to do it. And I explained why I needed to do it. It wasn't like I woke up one day and said, oh, let's have a proprietary beverage. It was because our drinks were declining, and that hurts PepsiCo as much as it hurt us. And so long story short, that's why Mountain Dew Baja Blast was created. And so I think what happens is, and I call it the 5 whys. You've got to ask why 5 times to get to the true insight. And I think a lot of people in marketing stop at the first or second why.
yeah.
And we got to the 5th why, which was free drink at home, which was a brilliant insight. And so I think 2 years ago or last year, Mountain Dew Baja Blast in Taco Bell alone did $1 billion. So I think what's happening is people think an insight's going to magically jump off the data. It's not. I don't think people spend enough time talking to the consumer, having a conversation. And I don't think we ask why enough times to get to the true insight.
If anybody's ever had a child, that exact feeling, because they won't stop asking why. And finally, you just break it down at the end out of exhaustion. Okay,
exactly.
Here's the real reason.
Yeah. And that's a skill we unfortunately lose.
Yeah.
It's a skill we should take from our children and apply in business, which is don't give up asking why until you get to the insight. Too many people act on observations. Drink sales amongst, teens were going down. That's an observation. That's not why it's going down. That's just what's happening. And so data usually tells you what. Invariably, it tells you why.
Chad, we got one more before rapid fire.
Greg, I'll end with this, right? So you're an optimist. You also said that you believe good guys can finish first. You don't have to be conniving to chart your path to success. Those seem very related. If things are more stressful now. So how do you orient people around that when they see examples where, at least to them, it seems like some of those connivers are the ones being successful? What do you point them to?
I point them to there's always a future, right? And that in the moment, it's like work-life balance. In the moment, there is never work-life balance. In any particular moment, you're either working hard or having fun, or you're enjoying, there is no work-life balance. So for me, it's all about over time, and will good things happen? And I also think sometimes when the pendulum swings way over here, the pendulum counter swings, back the other way. I guess when you're young, I've seen the swings occur, right? Because I'm old, but I'm an optimist because I think that we ultimately learn our lessons, we make change, and we ultimately get back to the right way of doing things. Because look, I've worked with people who I was like, I remember being quite young thinking, this person's not that smart. Why the hell are they in this job? And they got to a certain level in the organization, but that's when they peaked out, right? So I do believe that that the world is going to be in a better place. I think life can be in a better place. I just hope work becomes more fun in the future, back to being more fun. Because I don't think fun is at the expense of performance. I think fun is what accelerates performance. And I think too many leaders think it's the or, it's like we either have fun or we perform. I think it's, as David Novak said, we have fun and that's why we perform. And I think it just takes courageous leaders to step up and make sure that, you know, they're listening, enhancing the team member experience, they're listening to their customers, and they're doing everything they can also to be distinctive, right? And so I'm going to go to my grave believing in that. And right now, is it uncomfortable? Yeah, but so is COVID. But there are better times ahead because we will all learn from our mistakes, and life really has an eraser at the end of our life, right? At the end of us, we all have a little eraser and we can rub it out and say, let's not do that again. And let's do something different. And let's try and do something better. It's all about mindset. It's all about mindset.
This is all good stuff, Greg. This can't be the only time you're on. There's so much to talk about. So it's time to go into our rapid fire mode, so to speak, and land the plane. I've got 7 questions here for you. These are supposed to be fun, quick, off the.
Yeah, cool.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
There we go. All right. Taco Bell or KFC? No hedging. What's your pick?
Taco Bell.
One brand right now that makes you think they get it.
Well, that's a good question. One brand that gets it. Dove.
Dove?
Dove's, yeah. Dove.
Share a little bit about that.
Well, I ran Dove about 30 years ago.
Soap.
Okay. Well, or shampoo and conditioner, whatever it is. I think the idea of empowering women to believe in themselves, which is what Dove is all about, empowering real women, I think is so much more powerful than I get your skin clean. And so I think any brand that owns the higher ground. I remember there was a campaign for Always, sanitary napkins for women. And the campaign was about throw like a girl. And there was this whole campaign about asking guys to throw like a girl. And so they all did the girl thing. Then they asked young girls to throw like a girl, and they threw like there was no tomorrow.
Right.
When you own that emotional high ground, i.e. real women, girls are as powerful and as wonderful as boys.
Yeah.
Then no amount of functional difference your competitors are going to talk about is going to make you want to buy that brand. You're going to want to buy the brand that emotionally reinforces the high ground.
You identify with it.
So Dove, I think, has always been an amazing brand. I mean, I don't have any. I'm just trying to think of other brands. Seems like.
I think that's good. I just learned something too. That's great.
Yeah.
One marketing trend you wish would just disappear.
That it's all about data science and it's not about actually understanding need states.
Okay.
You've got to solve people's problems. And even if they don't know they have a problem, you can tell them they've got a problem and solve it. But demographics is not a need state. And demographics is what you buy media against, but it's not a need state to grow your business.
What's something small that makes a surprisingly big difference in a company?
Culture. You can't even measure it. I mean, you can't measure culture, right? It's not like, well, sales grew this and something did that and hours per transaction were this. But it is the most gigantic small thing in every organization.
First red flag that a brand doesn't understand its customer.
When it only talks about the functional benefits it's selling and not the emotional reason why the customer needs it.
This is good stuff. All right. And 2 more. If AI ran your marketing team for a week, what would impress you and what would worry you?
What would impress me is that we'd be able to crunch so much more data. What would worry me is we wouldn't put critical thinking on top of the data.
That lines up, Chad, with what Sol Rashidi was talking about. Is don't lose the critical thinking aspect to keep coming back to that.
That's my biggest fear.
Yeah.
That people will sort of stop being inquisitive. It really worries me that, well, if I need an answer, I'll just go to ChatGPT. And the answer is, but that's not always right.
Yeah. The sycophantic nature of the tool.
Yeah, exactly. I used it. I play Wordle, WORDLE. And so I answer the question and then I ask ChatGPT to answer it. And it only gets it right about 60% of the time.
Well,
and it'll go, oh, well, this, because of this outline, this has to be Chad, or this has to be the Dominican Republic. No, it's not. It's Papua New Guinea. So
right.
My worry is that people will accept it because ChatGPT said it's the Dominican Republic. They go, oh, it's the Dominican Republic. No, it's not. It's Papua New Guinea. So that's what really worries me, is that people won't challenge the outcome of ChatGPT. That really worries me. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to get off.
That's okay. And actually, I'm going to inject one question here just for fun. Is a Reese's peanut butter cup a candy bar?
It's funny. I don't like peanut butter anything. Is it a candy bar? Yes, it is.
And lastly, you said you collect wisdoms.
Yeah.
What's one that comes to mind at the end of this conversation after what we just talked about?
There is, I
You
guess
can't ChatGPT it. I'm just kidding.
no. I'm going to say, sell what people want sell why people want your product, not what it does.
So you
So
now we're Simon Sinek'ing, or start with why.
sell why people want your product, not what it does.
Sell why people want your product, not what it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people sell what it does. They don't sell why you want it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely I love all this. Greg, your energy is infectious. I didn't expect you to be this fun. I'm gonna say it out loud. Like, you are fun. I like talking to you. This is absolutely awesome.
I've had a great time. I love doing this because, as I said earlier, there's 3 phases of life, learn, earn, return. And I'm in the return phase of my life. And I honestly can say this is the best for your soul, is in the return phase.
Mm.
And I enjoyed learning. Again, I was a B student, but I still enjoyed it. I love my earning phase of my life. But I think, honestly, my soul is more enriched by return than it is the first 2. And so the ability to talk to, you and Chad, it makes me feel good too, right? That there are places we can share our wisdoms and our experience, so that hopefully it gives other people courage and sort of perseverance through what we're going through.
Wow, Greg, there aren't words. For once in my life, there aren't words. I see it in Chad's face too. Well, it's definitely time to land the plane. And this one, I hate landing it because I could keep this flight going. This is really great. I'd love to invite you back for another round. Before we wrap up, I know you do travel still for shows. Is there anything that's coming up that we're going to see you at?
I'm going to be giving a presentation in Scottsdale in a couple of weeks. And
What's that? Is that
it's to the Cold Storage Association, which I thought was really interesting that they would invite me.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to talk about, not surprisingly, leadership, building brands, and also partnerships. How do you make great partnerships? So I've got that coming up, and then no other real speaks. I've got a bunch of board meetings and all of those sort of
We're not
things.
going to see you in Arizona next week for the Restaurant Leadership Conference?
Unfortunately, it clashes with two board meetings. I've got a Whirlpool board meeting and a Delta board meeting. So unfortunately, I won't be at RLC. But you'll see me at Prosper and everything else. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you there too. So, well, guys, this has been Greg Creed. What are you now? Citizen?
Retiree.
Retiree.
It's so funny.
I would argue you are not freaking retired after what you just mentioned on all the things you're doing.
Well, it's funny. My wife said, I'm giving you an F for retirement. I said, oh, is that for fantastic? And she goes, no, that's for failure.
I think if you were in one place in the house, you'd both go bonkers. If I know you're.
Oh, that's true. That is very true.
Yeah. Well, everybody, thank you so much. And Greg, thank you for being part of our show today. And to our audience, thank you for joining us and letting us be part of your community and the things that you listen to and spend time with. And in closing, the thing we always like to close with: random acts of kindness, sprinkle that stuff everywhere. Yep. Greg is a great example of that, having shared some time with all of us today. And we're thankful for that. And so, just keep doing the good work. Take the high road.
And Michael and Chad, I just want to thank you for having me on and giving me the chance to share what I'm passionate about. And I really appreciate it. And I've really enjoyed the conversation, guys.
Right back at you. Well, everybody, thank you so much. And we'll see you guys on the next one.
See you guys. Thanks very much. Bye.